Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on X or Twitter or whatever the hell you want to call this thing nowadays. Doesn't matter to me. We're live on it regardless, and we are ready to rock. Couple minutes later than usual. We just had a couple technical difficulties, plus finishing up some awesome graphics for everybody who is here as part of the live show on YouTube. But that being said, we have a lot to talk about. John Saponaro out in Los Angeles, California. Matt Ibby Ibanez holding things down back in New Jersey. Ibby, how you doing, man?
John, I'm doing pretty well outside of those technical difficulties we were just hinting at. Other than that, I'm doing well, and I apologize to people who are looking at me probably looking off into the distance with certain things. Different camera today, working through some issues, but we're gonna make it work. We always do, and as always, we're excited to talk some Mets. Mainly because it gets to be an episode where we shut down some of the garbage that we've heard over the last couple of weeks, but really hit on some points that we've been really harping on also over those same amount of weeks. So it's going to be an interesting show. I'm pumped up to get into it, so let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff Cohen chiming in. We got a lot of comments coming in before we went live. Jeff Cohen said, when can we start bitching about these stupid Alonso rumors? Almost immediately, honestly. We could start doing that. Keith Blacknick saying X gonna get you, which I think is a remix to X gonna give it to you by DMX. And then Shay saying technical difficulties equals picking out fire hats. That's how it works.
Yeah,
we can't decide. We got to make sure we don't wear two hats that are too similar. And then Jeff Cohen saying, hey, when is the QBC this year? So I'll let Keith go ahead and answer that in the comments. Yeah, so you know what, Ibby, I got to be honest, before we dive into, this is going to be just for everybody listening, this is going to be a Pete Alonso, Ronny Mauricio heavy episode. We joked the last couple episodes that we're going to do a deep dive on Jonathan Arauz and do a deep dive on Danny Mendick and all this shit. We're not going to do that. But we will deep dive on the Mets, one of the Mets' top prospects, of course. We will deep dive on the Mets' star first baseman. We will do that. And Keith Blacknick saying the QBC is Saturday, December 2nd, which is fast approaching this year. So we'll talk more about that as we get closer. Maybe the first thing I want to say is just as it relates to our New York Mets. You know I'm a diehard. You know I'm watching all the games like we all are, right? My work schedule sometimes gets in the way of that, especially when the games aren't big games, right? Last year in the playoffs, I was in New Zealand watching playoff games, right? I was on the other side of the world getting up at 9 o'clock in the morning to watch Mets baseball. I don't really care that I didn't watch an inning of Mets baseball this weekend. I was busy. I was at work. It was a long work weekend. I didn't watch any of it, and I didn't care. And, you know, I think for me, it takes a lot for apathy to set in because somebody tweeted, I think it was Colin Cosell tweeted, hey, you know, you're going to miss baseball when baseball's over. However, you know, that this season didn't go the way that we wanted it all to go, but you're going to miss it when it's over. So you should still watch it. And that's always how I feel when baseball is over. I have baseball craving, like immediately I want it back. Yeah. So it takes a lot for apathy for me to set in. And again, I'm not like just sitting home, not watching it by choice, but the fact that I didn't have to watch it, I was like, eh.
No, I mean, and you're not wrong because, you know, coming from my end, like, taking into account last year and comparing it to this year, the amount that I was watching and the amount of time that, like, when I say I watched every single game last year, I watched every single
game last year.
Yeah, I watched every single game. Sorry. I'm watching every single game last year. And this year, you know, especially in the beginning, like I'm not saying I wasn't into it, but like we have talked about frequently, like something was missing, something was off, and that was really the theme of the season, really. And, you know, as we get past the deadline and selling things off and the players that we're seeing, like, you're not alone on this. Like, I'm watching the games, but I'm not as invested as I normally am. Usually I go like really in depth for our Facebook community where I'm breaking things down and everything, and I haven't been doing that as much, mainly because there's not much to really talk about. Like last night's was very simple. It's like, you know, you wasted another good start. You struck out 11 times or whatever it was. And it's like, you know, it doesn't have the same effect on me. But I still support the team and I'm still watching where I can, but I'm not watching every single pitch, every single inning. Whereas last year I was like, I didn't want to leave the couch. Now it's like, nah, I'll get up and then I'll walk over. I'll do something. I'll do something. I'll get something else done, or I'll listen while I'm doing something else as well. But yeah, you're not alone in that feeling for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the sentiment here in the comments. Keith chiming in for sure, but for a lot of folks. Oh, and just a quick reminder from Jeff Cohen, something that the Mets are trying out. I think it's the only time this year. The Mets game is starting at 6:40 today, so we'll try to get done, right around the time that the Mets game is starting. Mm-hmm. That's a good tip. Sorry that we were late. We knew that going in, but we also just, life happens, and you kind of sometimes can't get done. And get live in time. But it's funny because Keith says, I was at the game with the 7 line on Friday night. And again, the game sucked the life out of me. And then he said, I went to the game Saturday because I got a free ticket. Yeah. I don't begrudge anybody going to games. I'm not trying to do that. Shay saying, yeah, I was folding laundry, Patty agreeing with you, Ibby. So I think there's been and then also saying, Shay, me too. I think there's been an apathy that's set in. And I think the reason why, and again, I'm not telling anybody how to be a fan. I'm not telling anybody to enjoy it. I'd never tell people to boycott games. I've been to games. I've been to the last game of the season in a game where they lost 90, in a season where they lost 90 games. So, I'm not sitting here telling anybody how to do their fandom. I just think it's funny how much this season has fallen. And I think the Mets have the opportunity, and this is why I want to start on the Ronny Mauricio stuff. The Mets are unwatchable right now because there's nothing to watch for. Right? It'd be that's the thing. Okay. Yes. Can Alonso conceivably catch up to Olsen and lead the league in home runs? Yes. Yeah. Can Alonso knock in 125 runs? Yes. Lindor is knocking on the door of a 30-30 season. Do I want these guys to get it? Yes, because they're great players. They're great Mets, and I want them to do it. But with them having Alvarez on this kind of pitch count where they're resting him, well, you don't get to see Alvarez every day. Brett Beatty got sent down, and we talked last week that we thought it was the right move, but he's not back here, so you don't have Brett Beatty to watch. Ronny Mauricio's not here. Mark Vientos, I think, is not the kind of guy that you want to go out and watch, right? He's fine, but they're not giving us anything to watch. The pitching is abysmal. And so, what do we look? And I understand why some of these guys aren't here, right? You might want to sit here and say, Vasil's not ready or whatever the case. And we could debate whether or not that's the case. But there are some people that are clearly ready. I think there is nothing. I was all for the reset of Brett Beatty, but I think Brett Beatty should now be back. I understand why some people say that Ronny Mauricio is not yet ready, but he's done everything he needs to do. He's hitting 300. He's hitting home runs. He's got average exit velocity of 107. This guy, what else does he have to do? And, Jeff Cohen's saying it right now. No one wants to see Stewart, Aruz, Mendick, and I like Stewart. And I do. I've said on this show, I've said on Twitter, I think Stewart is playing himself into the potential for a bench role next year, at least a spring training invite. I would. Guy's got power. Guy could do some stuff. But Mauricio should be here. So let's start with that. Because if you want to say they sent down Beatty and he's got this full reset and they're not yet ready to recall him, fine. If you want to sit here and you say that they don't want to bring up any of their pitchers who are kind of on the precipice but not 100% there ready to rock because they're not top guys, fine, right? Let Dennis Reyes get beat up and let these other guys get beat up and don't have Mike Vasil get beat up. I understand that logic a little bit, but what does Mauricio need to do to be on this team? I know your sentiment has been that you feel like he might not be and he's going to be traded and all this stuff, but it doesn't make any sense. You're not going to hurt his trade value if he comes up for 5 weeks and isn't good. You're not good. It's not going to affect what he can fetch you. I'm telling you.
I've said my piece, and you just alluded to it, and where I felt this team. And even though when Joe DeMaio was on here, he told me that he didn't outright say I was wrong, but he didn't agree with my thought, and that's fine. It's if anything, I would trust Joe over my own opinion in that sense as well, because he knows more than I do. But I've always just felt this way for a while about him. It's just I feel like they don't trust him. I feel that they think he's going to be a butcher in the field, and they don't want to see him come up and strike out a bunch, and they fear that that's going to tank his value. That is what I think that their feeling is. I'm not saying that that's my feeling. I'm just saying that that's what I think that their feeling is there's a little bit of a difference. Do I want to see the guy play? Absolutely. I mean, I'd much rather watch him try to adjust at the major league level as opposed to watching Danny Mendick roll the ball over to third base or Jonathan Arauz coming in the eighth for defense and then strike out in the ninth. Like, I would much rather watch Ronny Mauricio get an opportunity because, look, it gets to a point, especially now for this Mets team as it's constructed and what we're watching for the next month, essentially, when I am more excited because I have them on alerts now when Michael Mayer and Joe DeMayo tweet, because I know they're putting out content of actually good baseball. So I get to see the highlights of Acuna and Gilbert, and Parada gets promoted, and I'm watching Ronnie rip the ball 110 miles an hour to the opposite field for a home run. It's like, that's good baseball. That's fun baseball. I want those are the things I want to see. I would also like to see that at the major league level. And I know that Brett's doing better. So I want to see him come back as well. But when it comes to Ronnie, it's just I don't know. I don't know why more questions aren't being asked of the team. And again, I know that's all about somebody like Billy Epler making himself available and someone you can actually ask, because you can't ask that question to Buck because it's not really his call. It's management's call if they're going to call a player up or if it's 100% needed in terms of the roster. Now, there have been opportunities over the past week or so where people have been shuttled back and forth where you said, maybe Ronnie, the 20th pass. So that rules. So he could come up. He could still be a rookie next year, all these things, but he's still not here. I don't know how to even answer this anymore. And I don't think anybody does because, like you said, it's one thing if a guy is down there and he's failing. That's one thing. And I know that people say that AAA at times can be, I think they're still playing with a little bit of a juice ball, and they're thinking, the results there aren't what you really think they're going to be once they get to the majors. It's a different game. It's different pitching, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I don't know what else this guy has to do to prove anything and how you can get mad at a fan for wondering the same exact thing and almost at this point demanding, where the hell is this guy? Why can't we watch him as opposed to watching highlights of him just tear up AAA pitching when you're stuck watching, like I said, Danny Mendick and whatever, Almonte and all those people. Like, I don't even know what to say anymore because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
Well, and that's the thing, Ibby, is that I don't care what the reason is, because this is not a guy who has been at AAA for 10 minutes. This is a guy who's been at AAA for the entire season. Yeah. I don't care if the ball is juiced. That's a Major League Baseball problem. That's a minor league baseball problem. That has nothing to do with what the Mets need to do here. And again, I also don't care that they are worried about his value, because I am of the thought process that 5 weeks or 4 weeks of a guy playing at the major league level is not going to hurt his value. Now, can you hurt a value if a guy gets called up and struggles? Yes, I'm not saying that's an impossible case situation, but that's the kind of situation you call a guy up in May, he struggles, he's up here for 2 months, he's hitting 178, he goes back down, then maybe he gets called up in July or August, and he struggles again. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh man, even if the guy's a legit prospect, you start to wonder, is this guy more of a quad A player? Is this guy, just not, especially when you've had the kind of up and down minor league career that Mauricio had, top prospect, almost not a prospect, back to a top prospect again. So I understand you have to be a little careful with his value. But I just think when you're looking at the alternatives here, and people are going to tell me that they're trying to tank, and I understand that aspect of it too, and maybe Mauricio gives you more of a chance to win games, but if you're so concerned with the fact that Ronny Mauricio, if you're the Mets organization, and none of us know this, but if you're so concerned that this guy might be bad enough to hurt his own value, well, then you're not concerned about him helping you not tank.
Right.
They're counterintuitive thought process.
That's right. It's true.
Call them up and come what may. I just look, and we can dump on the replace, right? Last year, there was a rally cry about the replace Mets and how good some of these bench mob players were and all that stuff. Now we can joke about how bad these guys are. But I don't think it's fair to put them all in the same boat. Like, Rafael Ortega, fine, plays decent defense. He's gotten a lot of hits with, like, I think his career batting average, the bases loaded, is like 400 and something. Like, he's gotten clutch hits. He plays decent defense. Obviously, DJ Stewart has hit a lot of home runs. So I think that there's, some of those guys play a role. But Almonte, Arauz plays good defense, but he's not a hitter. Danny Mendick is the prime example of a quad A player. So I just don't know what else he needs to do. I don't know what else. I can't get behind the hurt your trade value thing. It's going to be 5 or 4 weeks. The best players in the history of baseball have had a bad 5 or 4 weeks. The guy has now established that he hits the ball hard, pulls the ball with authority, hits for power, won the MVP in the Dominican League. This is not the Ronny Mauricio from a year and a half ago where you're like, man, this guy's dropping off a prospect status, and you better not insert him in the major league level, because now you're really going to tank his value. I would almost argue that they're tanking his value by not calling him up, because it's almost like the Mets see something watching him every day that other teams who don't watch him every day don't see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you're almost creating a narrative of like, oh shit, is this guy good at baseball?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great counter, because it's like, if you're so afraid to call this guy up, you're almost broadcasting to everyone that you don't think this guy is any good, because you don't even have the leg to stand on in saying that, well, the talent that we have at third base or second base or in the outfield is far superior to Ronny Mauricio. So it's not like you could say he's blocked, because he's not blocked. And you could easily then say, well, if you're afraid about his defense, you can just make him the DH. And it's like, I know Daniel Vogelbach has done better, and his OPS in the second half is like over 800 and things like that. I get that. But yeah, at the same time, it's also, because I saw that was really being bantered about today. And it's like, I get it. I understand that a player is doing that, but it's also context in terms of where the team is. And it's like, is an 800 OPS for Daniel Vogelbach really helping a team that's out of it, and he's probably not going to be here next year? And it's like, what? There's no point, because the wins aren't coming. He's not making a difference. He's not a core piece. So those at bats could be going to someone else to see if you have something. And that's always been my problem when it comes to prospects with this team. And it's been, not realizing that you have an opportunity to give some playing time, to get an idea of a player. To your point, you don't know what can happen in a 4-week period. You don't. He could be great, and it could be a flash in the pan. He could be terrible and just be a blip on the radar. But regardless, you need to know what a player can potentially offer you, because like I said before, I want to have an idea of things from a roster standpoint going into the offseason, when I know I have some moves I have to make at certain positions, or some deals I might be trying to make for trades, et cetera, et cetera. If I don't know anything about a player, if I don't know what he can do against major league players, it's malpractice to just assume that something is going to work that next year. We've seen that before, where it's like, oh yeah, we'll just plug in X player and he's going to do great for us. And then it doesn't work. And then you're like, well, we were banking on us. Well, it's like, well, if you would have given this guy some time prior in the lost season prior, to get some playing time, to get his feet wet a little bit, to come in, reinvigorated and ready and understanding of what, the major league setting is like, that changes the whole perspective for a player. By not doing that, you're hurting the player. So I continue to say this, and I'll stick with it. It's like, I feel, because of how this is being handled, and maybe we'll see him for a couple of weeks in September, maybe, but I just, at this point, I feel like he's not going to be here. Like that's the way I feel, because if he was going to be here, I think he would have been here. And when I say that, I mean in terms of the future and understanding that he can be a part of this moving forward. The fact that we haven't seen him yet, to me, that's alarming. And I just feel like I don't think we're going to see this guy. That's just how I am, because I feel so beaten down like just talking about it, like I feel like that's where we are as a fan base, because it's like, if this guy's not here now, I don't think he's ever coming.
And look, again, it's not to conflate things. Last week I said you got to be careful. You have these prospects that are upper echelon, like Alvarez, and the conversation was always Alvarez and Beatty, Alvarez and Beatty, Alvarez and Beatty, and it's like whoa, Alvarez up here, and then Beatty down here.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not a knock on Beatty. It says Alvarez is the number one prospect in baseball. Alvarez plays a premier position. Alvarez has proven better than advertised on both sides of the ball, basically. Right. So you have to be careful when you do that. So I'm not calling Ronny Mauricio a Alvarez-like prospect. I am also not saying that that Mauricio is going to come up here and be the solution. I'm not saying that Mauricio is going to come up here and be a difference maker. I'm saying that I don't know, and based on everything he's done to this point, through the ebbs and flows of success and failure, through the ebbs and flows of losing his prospect status nearly, he has shown that he is a resilient guy with some tools. And I, as a Mets fan, would like to see him do it in Queens in some meaningless games so that we can get a better grasp as to where we're going for the next season. And I'm always felt this way when it comes to these guys. Even guys who I was like, I'm not sure, because Patty in NYC says, haven't we learned through Beatty and Vientos that it's different in the majors? And of course it's different in the majors. And of course we have learned that through both of those guys and countless guys before them and countless guys since. But last year, Ibby, around the trade deadline, what was I saying to you? I was like, call up Mark Vientos. He is tearing the cover off of the ball. J.D. Davis and Dom Smith are giving you zero. And the worst thing that you can do for a month before the trade deadline, or the worst case scenario, is you call up Mark Vientos. He doesn't give you anything either. And then you probably have to go make the same trades for Vogelback and Ruff that they wound up making anyway. But if Vientos would have taken the job and run with it, maybe you wouldn't have had to make those two trades that everybody has since hated. Now, based on everything Vientos has done in his major league career, it leads you to believe that the Mets probably, law of predetermined outcomes and all that stuff, but the Mets probably would have had to go and make those trades anyway, because J.D. Davis didn't give you anything, Dom Smith didn't give you anything, and in the small sample size, Mark Vientos has had, one or two moments where he's looked like, the guy that he is in AAA. So to be fair, I understand that this is not a one-for-one at the major league level. I understand that these guys, have no guaranteed success when they come up here. And part of me, Ibby, appreciates the fact that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the Mets were like, our prospects are the best. Every prospect we have is the best. Every prospect we have is going to be a star. Everybody's five tools. I never seen less five-tool players pan out than the Mets prospects, right? Whether it was Lastings Millage, who I actually think would have been better if he came up now. I think Lastings Millage was a very toolsy kid. But Fernando Martinez and all these guys, the list goes on and on and on.
Alex Ochoa,
more guys who don't amount to anything. They're not even guys who don't amount to like great careers, right? You take a guy like Melvin Mora, who came up with the Mets, right? And you're like, Melvin Mora had a decent career. Now, maybe Melvin Mora was on steroids. I don't care, whatever. Yeah. But like Melvin Mora had a decent career in Baltimore. Wasn't the prospect that everybody thought he was going to be, but you named the other Alex Ochoa and Fernando Martinez, and these guys never amounted to anything. So I understand it's possible. But at this point, sometimes, like I said last week, and I'll repeat it later when it comes to Alonso, sometimes you have to do things because they're a good baseball decision. And sometimes you have to do things for vibes. And sometimes they overlap. And right now it overlaps. I think it's a good baseball decision to give Ronny Mauricio some at-bats at the major league level. And I also think the kid fucking deserves it because he's done everything possible. What more does he need to do?
I would hope, and I'm with you, but I would also hope that this isn't, now what I'm about to say is it's not what I'm thinking. I'm just saying I hope that this isn't the thought process of the Mets, because when you look at what Vientos did last year and when they didn't make the move, and we were on this show clamoring for them to call up Mark Vientos because he was tearing the cover off the ball. And I could say, based off of probably averages, strikeout rate, home runs, I would have to look at it, but whether it's similar or even better on the Vientos end, I should say. The fact that they didn't call him up last year because of the fear of what he would do. And as we've seen, it's a different game, AAA to the bigs, especially with Vientos, even though he did have the home run last night against Chapman. It makes me wonder, do they feel that Mauricio is on that level of prospect similar to that of Mark Vientos, and that's why they're not calling him up, because they think he can't handle the pitching? But at the same time, I'm praying that is not the case, because in my opinion, that is improper to just assume one thing from one player and then, throw that same thought process on another player. They see these guys every day. I would hope that there's an idea, but at the same time, if you really put, and it's not going to happen because you won't see Billy Epler in front of a camera probably ever again. But I would love for him to be in front of a camera, specifically at the end of the year, especially if Ron Mauricio is not called up. And I would love for someone to have the balls in that press room to say, Billy, can you please explain to me why Ron Mauricio did not come up this year, or why it took you until, 2 weeks left of the season in September to finally call up Ronny Mauricio? What was the thought process there? I would love to hear the gymnastics that will be pulled on that one to understand, or try to give the fan an understanding as to why a player who was tearing the cover off the ball, who put in ridiculous stats, which is what baseball is. It's numbers, it's statistics, who put up all these crazy numbers, and you didn't call him up on a team that had basically a dying offense, specifically in the month of September. And even earlier than that, why did you not call up a potential spark plug? I would love to hear that answer. And I don't know if we'll ever get it, because like I said, I don't know if we'll ever see Billy Epler in front of a camera again.
Yeah, especially if he doesn't, if David Stearns comes in and he becomes president of baseball ops, and, Billy Epler becomes one of his lieutenants, even if he stays in the GM role, you're going to hear from David Stearns more often than you're going to hear from Billy Epler, because that's just how the hierarchy works. So, I do agree with you on that front. I want to jump back into the comments. And speaking of, you guys are watching Till Mets Do Us Part. We're live on YouTube. We're live on X and Twitter and all that stuff. I don't know how many people watch us on X or Twitter, because the comments don't come in real time. We don't get to see them. But of course, if you watch on YouTube and you're watching live, you've already seen it. Your questions, your comments, your concerns, and we'll get to as many as we can, as always, coming in real time, and we can address them. And sometimes we even scroll back and get to ones that we haven't had the opportunity to get to while we're kind of making our own points. So make sure you stay tuned in live, hit the thumbs up while you're watching live, and all that fun stuff. Talking Mets with Rob says, hopefully Mauricio will get a call up in September. Always felt that he was the biggest trade piece. And that's kind of been a little bit of what people have been saying. You've said it, and a lot of people have agreed with you in terms of they don't want to hurt his value. Patty in NYC, I think he's a trade piece, which I've said early in the season. They're not playing him because he can't field. I think can't field is probably a stretch. Not a great fielder is probably a little bit more accurate of how to say that. Joe K joking around saying it's Epler's philosophy. You need to be past your prime to be called up. But I want to address the trade piece part. Yeah. Because Ibby, and after this, we'll head into the break. We'll talk about Alonso. We're going to try to wrap this up right around game time, but still do our full hour. So the trade piece thing is interesting to me because we talk about value, right? But nobody ever talks about what happens on the other side of it, right? You remember Mike Jacobs?
Of course I do.
Mike Jacobs came up, hit a whole bunch of home runs, and then what did
the 30 Mets homers? Do? Something like that, yeah.
Right, but when he came up with the Mets, that at the end of that season, hit a whole bunch of home runs for the Mets. And then what did the Mets do with Mike Jacobs? They traded him to get Carlos Delgado. A big piece of was a NLCS team. One of the best teams in baseball for a couple of years. And he was the missing piece. And I know it wasn't just Mike Jacobs, but Mike Jacobs played a huge part in that because he showed a lot of power potential. And the Marlins were like, oh, I guess we can use this guy as the temporary stopgap. I'll go a little bit more recent. And I know he's turned himself into a really good ball player and he got the extension and that's great. But Andres Jimenez?
Yeah.
What did the Mets do with Andres Jimenez after they called him up and he played a little bit here?
Turned him into Francisco Lindor.
Francisco Lindor. And I know some idiots are going to argue that Jimenez, especially last year, they were like, Jimenez is better than Lindor. He's not.
Yeah, he's not.
No, he's not. He's not. Ahmed Rosario is not better than Lindor. Obviously, He's since been moved on. And Ahmed Rosario, good ball player, can do some stuff well. I think Jimenez is the better of those two players. But they called these guys up when there was a need. And they called both of those guys up when potentially they shouldn't have. I don't remember exactly where Jacob's prospect, non-prospect status was when they called him up. He was kind of just like hey, we need a guy who could hit some home runs and fill in a little bit. We need a guy. And they called him up. But I don't remember, how old he was and stuff like that. It's a bit longer ago. But with Jimenez, when the Mets called him up, people were like, oh, shit, it's early to call up this guy. It's a little soon to call up this guy. And he came up and he played well, and then he was the main piece that got you Francisco Lindor. So for everybody who's saying, and this is not an attack on Patty and NYC or you or anybody's argument who's saying this, but for everybody who's like, Mauricio's a trade chip. Okay, call him up. He doesn't have to hit 350 to be a trade chip. Call him up. He might hit 225 and hit 5-6 home runs in the last 5 weeks. And people go, oh, man, I think this guy could be our shortstop. Next thing you know, the Mets have a pitcher. The Mets have Corbin Burns. The Mets have, and they get to hang on to guys they like better. I don't think he's going to hurt himself. Maybe not in 4 or 5 weeks. I hate to beat a dead horse, but I think there's another side of this. And Keith Blacknick agreeing. He said, such a smart moves, Jacobs for Delgado.
Yeah, it's like I said, you can attack this argument, this entire conversation from both ends and come out of it and saying that each side has a proper way of thinking about it. And like I said, my side is basically my side is more so what I think the Mets side is. I want to see the guy play. But I've been saying that I don't think we're going to because that's what I think the Mets think. I want to see the guy play. I want to see if he can come up here and hit home runs. I want to see if he can provide some power to a lineup that needs it. Because, look, like I've said before, you're not going to have $20 million players at every position. You're not going to. You have to find players that can contribute to you, that are cheap, that fill out a lineup, that provide something different than somebody else within that lineup. Everyone still has a role, even as baseball has changed with a more analytical approach. Everyone still has a role. And if this guy can be a potential role filler when it comes to power, specifically cheap power, that you can plug in and say the 7th spot in a lineup, like that's a good thing to have. But we're never going to know until we actually see the guy play. Exactly. And I don't know. It's insane to say this. As bad as this team is, as they stand at, what are they, 60 and 73, 13 games under 500, and this guy can't get at bats. I understand the tank. Believe me, I get the tank. But at the same time, throughout that tank, you have to realize that you still have to look ahead to see what can help you so you don't have to worry about tanking next season. You have to start thinking about ways to improve yourself and finding out if Ronny Mauricio can provide for you. I think it's a big step.
A lot of people in the comments kind of echoing the same thought process beyond what you were saying about Billy Epler. Jeff Cohen saying Epler will say he didn't check all the boxes, yada, yada, yada. Yamid saying his answer will be the same. He has to jump more hurdles. Like just kind of, the classic GM speak that, that every GM does. Right. When it's right there in your face, it's kind of difficult for you to, sometimes you just want plain truths, right? And like, he's not going to say anything to hurt Mauricio's value of like, oh, we don't think he's that good. You know what I mean? Like he obviously can't, but you have to sometimes when you're having a bad season and it's a frustrating season, you don't want to hear trust the process, right? Was that the old Philadelphia 76ers thing? Trust the process. Trust the process. You don't want to hear that when your team sucks. When your team's good, you're like, yeah, I trust the process. I don't care. You can do whatever the hell you want.
Well, like when I look at it too, and believe me, I am not comping Mauricio to this player because this player was touted as the number 1 prospect in baseball this season, and that's Jordan Walker over in St. Louis. Jordan Walker broke camp with the team as he should have because he was dominating in the spring. And the thing, and I believe he started the season off with a 12-game hit streak. Like he started off really hot, and everyone's like, okay, this guy's the future. And then he kind of went to a little bit of tailspin because it coupled with his bad defense. And he was believe me, the guy's a butcher out in the outfield. He's a third baseman, but you're not playing third base because Nolan Arenado is playing there. So he's a butcher in the outfield, so they send him down. And everyone's like, well, this team stinks. Why are you sending him down? Let him keep playing. And they kept him down there for a while. And he came back up, and guess what? He's still not that good out in the outfield. But he's a bat that you want to get in the lineup. If you're touted as a big prospect, you want this guy to get reps, get live reps to try and get better. You live with the errors to see if he can get better, so then you can decipher what can we do next? Where can we put him? Is this guy going to work out as an outfielder? Can he be a DH? But eventually, they got their head out of their ass. They called him back up, and he's been up ever since. He's had an up and down year, not the type of prospect season they thought he was going to have, similar to like they thought he could provide like a spark that Corbin Carroll did. Didn't happen in that sense. And that's okay because not every rookie's going to do that. But they realized we're going to get this guy in the everyday lineup. We're going to play him. And I understand the pedigree here is different. But at the same time, based off where the Mets are, it's not going to hurt you to let this guy come in for the last 4 weeks of the season to see if something can be provided. Will that happen? Like I've said, I will believe it when it actually does.
We'll put this just overarching conversation to bed and head into the break off of this comment. I wanted to get to it. Yamid said this earlier, said, how about some other Mets homegrown like Carlos Cortez instead of the Rafael Ortegas of the world?
Right.
And I think that's a good point. But Ibby, to me, that one matters a little bit less because let's just use Cortez as the example, right?
Sure.
I think the Mets, and I think most of Major League Baseball, would view a guy like Cortez's ceiling about what Rafael Ortega's ceiling is, right? And the Mets are in evaluation mode, but the Mets with a guy like Ortega or a guy like Stewart, you know, maybe they have eyes on them as like, oh, this guy could be the 26th man on our roster next season. And I don't think that that's out of the question, right? I don't know if a guy like Cortez is going to be any better than that. To your point about Mauricio, you know, Mauricio might be not a superstar, but he might be a guy who can hit seventh and provide some power and play a couple different positions below average, but get enough at bats when you do it that way. And that's a very useful everyday player. I think that when you look at some of these other guys who the Mets are not calling up in favor of the Ortegas and the Arauzes and the Stewarts of the world, I think it's just simply because the Mets view them differently. The Mets view them as interchangeable. Right. And so in that sense, at least that's how I view them. Right. I view those guys as, yeah, this guy might be the fourth or fifth outfielder, might come up and, you know, play for 5 or 6 weeks if somebody gets an injury. But this is not somebody with a wealth of talent where you're like, oh, my God, you have to get Cortez at bats instead of Rafael Ortega. I understand why people want it. And certainly if the Mets do it, I'm not going to be upset. I have no loyalty to Rafael Ortega. But I think at least the way I'm interpreting it and what I've seen from those guys in the minors and what the projections of people who study these players like Joe DeMayo and stuff have all said, like, they're not really prospects. They're just kind of guys, you know? Yeah.
No, and I get what you're saying, but I also understand the question being asked in terms of, you know, why not just, and I'm just echoing what you were just saying. It's like, you know, does this team really need to have Rafael Ortega here? Do they need to have Arauz when you can say, well, Carlos Cortez, 2 homers last night and 6 RBIs, and he's been hitting well, and there's other guys down there as well, where it's like, you know, why don't you give these guys a little bit of run as opposed to guys that you know don't really have that that cachet to their name to really stay. It's like, you know, Rafael Ortega is just here because he's let's be honest, he's just a body filling in. If Cortez, even though you might think, well, he might end up just being a guy too. It's like, he might be, but if I had to have a choice, I would say, yeah, I would much rather be watching, you know, Cortez as opposed to Ortega, because maybe there is something that can spark there. And I understand why a fan would say, I would much rather watch this guy who might have a future as opposed to the guys that are here where you're like, once these guys are done here, they're not going anywhere. And if they go somewhere, they're going to be in someone's AAA team and they're going to fill in once, you know, a downturn happens for that team and they're desperate for bodies. They just call someone up to fill in a spot. So I get what the question being asked was, but, you know, even though that they might end up not being anything special, I get wanting to see someone like a Cortez as opposed to an Ortega.
And this is an interesting wrinkle and follow-up, and good on him for bringing it up, which I knew, but I kind of forgot. Carlos Cortez will be a Rule 5 this year, so why not take a look at him instead of a 32-year-old?
Yeah.
Which I do agree with. I did forget about that aspect.
100%.
And so, that does kind of tick it over in the other direction, right? If you've got a guy who's a potential Rule 5.
You want to hold that guy? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe give him some reps instead of Ortega. And Ortega's been good. So maybe it's not even instead of Ortega. Maybe it's instead of Almonte. Maybe it's instead of having Jonathan Arauz, right? You understand that like Cortez is a more similar player to Ortega, but maybe you could have both of them on the roster and not Danny Mendick, right? Like there's a roster manipulation that you could do that involves giving both of them a couple looks while also, not hamstringing yourself with regards to next season and a potential Rule 5. That said, let's put this conversation to bed. Let's head into the break. Everybody watching live, and there's a lot of you. The break is just the 10-second ad spot we need for the audio version of the show, so don't go anywhere. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the article from Disha Thozar and regarding Pete Alonso and his potential future here with the New York Mets. So we'll be right back. It's Till Mets Do Us Part. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibi Ibanez. We'll see you in a few seconds. Yo, just like that, we are back. Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on X. And of course, watching us live on YouTube is the best way to become a full-fledged member of the show. Your questions, your comments, your concerns, your heckles, your whatever you want to do comes in real time. We can see it. We can react to it. Sometimes you bring up things that we didn't even think of or stuff that, adds to the conversation in a great way. And we appreciate all of it. Jeff Cohen saying, hit the thumbs up button. Do it now. I'm going to be a little less aggressive. If he's going to be very aggressive. There we go. Do it. Shay saying like and subscribe. If not, you're toxic. And not even the good toxic like Britney Spears. Toxic. Like people call me on Twitter. They say I'm toxically positive about the Mets. I don't know what that means, but you could fuck right off. So anyway, I like to, be hopeful about the teams that I root for.
You're a jerk, Sapanaro. You're a huge jerk.
I am a jerk. Anyway, so that said, make sure that you hit the like button if you like what you're watching. You can also watch the entire episode as soon as we're done if you missed anything on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe, you will make sure that you're locked in. Also, if you turn notifications on, that'll be a better way to make sure you don't miss when we go live. And if you can't do any of that, you can listen to us starting tomorrow. The audio version of this podcast drops around 7, 8, or 9 in the morning, something like that, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. And of course, all of those times are Eastern because nobody cares about us poor bastards who live out here on the West Coast like me and Shay and a couple.
We're all poor.
So, having said that, let's talk about the Disha Thozar rebuttal to what's been going on with Alonso. And Disha, very good reporter, doesn't work exclusively with the Mets anymore. Her coverage has kind of changed when she shifted from one newspaper to over to Fox, right? I think her roles have switched a bit. But Disha is great. She's always been a great beat reporter of the New York Mets. And I think part of it, Ibby, is because she's younger. Honestly, I think what happens in beat reporting is a lot of people get these jobs that are coveted jobs, and then they cover the team for 30 or 40 years, and they turn into miserable old curmudgeon bastards. That's really what happens. It's rare that you get a guy like Ed Coleman who covers the Mets for 30 years and manages to be pretty fair and balanced throughout. The Jets have it with guys like Rich Cimini, and those are the ones that I know well. Yeah, Brian Costello. They had it where the worst of them was Manish Mehta, right?
Biggest
all
jerk.
of these teams have it, and those are the teams I love. So these are the people that I know, right? The Andy Martinos of the world, the people who are just so fucking jaded and miserable that it's honestly disgusting. And that's why I love the work that Disha Thozar does. I love Will Salmon, who's been a guest on this show. We're trying to get Will back on, by the way.
Yes.
He was great. He writes for The Athletic. And we are trying, I talked to her today, we're trying to get Disha Thozar on. It was a little too quick to have her on for this episode, but we are trying to get her on the show in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully she can talk and expand a little bit more on the article that you wrote. I would love to have her on. Her work is fantastic. But I'm not just blowing smoke. The reason why I bring this stuff up is because she is in the clubhouse. With respect to Sal Licata and all these other people, they're not in the clubhouse. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have sources. I'm not saying they don't know anybody who's in the clubhouse, but she's in the clubhouse. And she put out an article today that said, hey, look, Pete Alonso is going to be a Met unless it's the money, unless he asks for so much money that it's absurd that Steve Cohen is like, I can't. No one's worth that money. Yeah. Unless he does that, he's going to be a Met because he's not toxic. Now, I'm not shaming Keith, who's in the comments, who does have some sources who says, hey, he's not the likable king that everybody thinks he is. He's not the goofy, fun-loving bastard that everybody thinks he is. Even Casey Stern said it. Well, Jake Brown alluded to it on the show over the last couple weeks. I understand that he is probably not a perfect guy. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm just saying he's not a toxic presence in the lineup on a daily basis, and I don't think he's a toxic presence in the clubhouse.
The only thing I want to say real quick before I get into that is, since I can't see the comments, Keith, if you read the article, I'm curious as to what your thoughts on said article are. If you could throw them in the comments, and then John will pull it up. But yeah,
Keith did have this to say while I was.
What do we got?
Saponaro, Toxic Avenger.
Perfect. No, I was so happy that the article came out because it was deep rooted in like actual journalistic integrity, like someone who did the work, and you have names attached to things. And I know there are losers on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, that would be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, but at the same time, if it's so weird to me how people actually think that it's like this elaborate plan to cover something up. Not like if people in that clubhouse hated the guy, people wouldn't come out and say these things. And if people knew that it was a problem within the clubhouse, they would simply say, no comment. We're not giving you any story. We're keeping everything in house. Like no one, Eric Chavez didn't have to put his name on anything. Players didn't have to come out and put their name on anything, but they did. And then you hear things, the people, players are going to champion for Alonso to Cohen to make sure he comes back. They want him here. It's like they didn't have to do that, but they did. And this is where my anger started with this entire thing when it came to Sal Licata, WFAN, everything that was going on, and how, I basically attacked radio when Casey was on a couple weeks ago, and I wasn't attacking Casey. I wasn't attacking him at all because I know he has a career in radio. But
listen,
I wasn't.
If anybody can take it, Casey can take it.
Casey can. Odds are he would have turned me inside out. So it doesn't even matter. But the point is, the point that I was trying to make was, I respect people in radio if they're bringing the knowledge, if they are bringing the information. I am an information-based person. I like reading information. I love learning new things, getting that knowledge of being smarter on something. I think a lot of sports fans are. You like, and that's what we provide. That's what other shows, that's what podcasts provide. A more focused look, broken down, not having to worry. And I understand ratings and all these things that come up, needing to generate engagement, needing to generate clicks. I understand that that's part of what they do. I don't have to like it, but I understand that's what they do. But I never appreciate when a shock jock or whatever you want to call it makes it a point to try and attack someone to better their engagement, because it's almost trying to hang that player out to dry as if they were the issue. And I never ever agreed with that, and that's why I fucking hated it when Sal did it, because I never believed it. Nobody believed it. And I understand that others said, well, no one's perfect. And it's like, I get that. To me, it was always a money thing. And with Disha's article, that's what it is. It's coming down to a money thing. I comped it to DeGrom last week, where I said, look, everyone thought Jacob DeGrom was going to be Met for life. They look at him and they go, Jake, based off the arm, based off what you provided us over the last handful of years, we can offer you 120. He's like, look, Texas is offering me $180 that can reach up to 220. Jake, if you want to take that, you want to leave, be my guest. We're not going to come close to that. And then it happens. That's it. That's business. If you have a number on a player, and we'll talk about numbers in a minute because we haven't over the last couple of weeks. If you have a number in your head and the Mets say to you, this is what we're offering, and this is probably the ceiling of where we're going to go. He goes, well, I'm going to go out there and see what I can get. Okay, we'll be here when you come back. And then he says, look, you're offering 200. Giants are offering me 250. Jake, Pete, we're not moving. I'm going to go to San Francisco. Okay. That's baseball. If you have a number, that's one thing. But to put everything on one guy because a season went south, a season or a team that nothing really changed with it outside of a couple of players from a previous year where not a single word was said that this person was toxic. And we talked about that off air. Talked about how things didn't really change year over year in terms of, well, if he did great this year, but he wasn't a problem, but now he's still doing great this year, but now he's a problem. It never made any sense in that sense. So I'm glad that Deesh did the article, and I know I'm ranting a little bit because I wanted to get this off my chest, but I'm glad she did the article because it needed to happen to just silence the bullshit. But I already know, and I already saw a tweet that pissed me off because I don't want that loser on my timeline. And it's not Sal, and it's not BT. It's the other guy who's giving bald guys a bad name, the guy who shit his pants that John loves so much, talking about, he might not be toxic, but it might be this, and it could be somebody else in the clubhouse, and you got to get rid of him anyway. It's like, God, you are such a blowhard and idiot. I'm sick and tired of you.
I know you're talking about Sean Morash. I know we shouldn't say their names, but I don't care because we're not beholden to anybody, and we have no bosses that say we can't do it. Sean Morash is I tweeted this today, and I believe this. I think he might be the single worst person in radio. I don't think just New York. I don't think just WFAN. I think he is fundamentally unlikable. He is a homer. He is rude. He is uninformed. And he is impossible to listen to. And
did you see?
I just don't like anything he does.
Did you see the ridiculous back and forth between him and Evan? Did you see that video that was posted?
No.
I look, me and Evan sometimes are not on the same page in terms of thoughts, but for the most part, I respect Evan, and and the knowledge that he has, I do.
Yeah.
But the back and forth that they were having, he was coming like Evan was very calm, very collected, and just presenting facts. Like that was it. Like he just kept on saying, "Well, this isn't what happened," and he's not toxic with this. Like it was very calm, not a screaming match. Morash is screaming at the guy. Screaming, saying all these things, and Evan was just very calm and saying, no, that's not what happened. It was this, and this. But again, we have to scream. We have to make a scene of everything to make it seem like we're informed, but we're not. And that's why I can't stand the way that the fan has gone. And that's going to be the end of me talking names and stations and stuff like that, because I think that it's improper because you are bored, and as always, it's Mets for clicks. It's the gesture. It's the point that I've made since day one on this show that you need someone to be the punching bag, and they're doing it a little bit more now with the Yanks because the Yanks are having a shitty year, but they still want to be able to attack the Mets because it's the easy and well-known punching bag for years prior.
Yeah, look, Shay saying best Ivy rant ever. Just saying, go off Ivy. And then to answer your question, I have a series of comments from Keith.
Yes,
saying,
curious.
One, I saw the article and he's not hated, but he has irked some players on the team with some of the stuff he's done. He follows it up by saying, from what I've heard from a few folks, he thinks he's worth more contract-wise than he actually is.
Which is, yeah.
And the organization came down on him with the LFGM and the humping and the cursing on air, which, that's fine if that's an organizational philosophy. Yeah. I don't care about that. And then he basically says, here's my thoughts on Alonso. Offer him the extension he's actually worth, and if he doesn't look like he's signing it, trade him.
Which is fine.
That's the one thing I wouldn't do, Ibby. I think you should field calls on Alonso. I think you should field calls on anybody.
I agree with that.
Again, I said it last week, and you used the word earlier. Like, it's malpractice for a GM if you're like, no, and you hang up the phone.
Right.
I don't care who it is.
No.
I don't care if it's Ohtani before the Tommy John. Like, hey, what do you want to offer? This is. Oh, no, absolutely not. Then you can hang up. But if you're like, hey, we want Ohtani. Okay, well, who do you want to give us? Hey, we want Francisco Alvarez. Okay, what are you giving us?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the return is what's a lot higher. Now, I'm not trading Alvarez because 30 to 40 home run bat catchers who play good defense that are 21 years old
years old,
grow on trees,
right?
Like, but it doesn't mean you say no. What if they're like, hey, we're going to give you, like, there's not even a package, but you know what I'm saying. Like, we're going to give you the best pitcher in baseball who's 24 years old, and we're going to give you the best outfielder in baseball who's 22, and we're going to give you the best shortstop who's 22. And I don't mean prospects. I mean, like, some team that's, like, loaded with major league talent.
Right.
Guys. We're giving you a 3-for-1 deal of guys who are under 25 for one player. Again, I probably still don't do it, but these are, you have to listen. You have to listen. It's insane if you don't. But with this Alonso stuff, I buy that he probably irks some people. I buy that his antics when the team is winning are probably great, and his antics when a team is losing is probably annoying. Yeah. But I don't think that means that he's toxic. And so I understand where Keith's coming from. I also understand that if you're going to offer a guy what is fair market based on your assessment and fair market based on what the market has dictated, and the guy doesn't take it, that is a different thing. But I wouldn't trade him because whether he accepts an extension or not. And the reason I wouldn't trade him is because I think that his free agency is going to go the way DeGrom's and Nimmo's went. Now, those are two different outcomes, but they went the same way. We're going to free agency, and we're going to see where the market goes. The Mets looked at Nimmo. They valued Nimmo to a certain degree. Nimmo had the opportunity to make money in other places. The Mets said, we want to keep you. The Mets made Nimmo happy. With DeGrom, they said, look, injuries are a concern. Life on that arm is a concern. We want to pay you very well, but we're not going to X years. We're not going to X dollars. He went and he took X years and X dollars somewhere else. I think with Pete, it's going to play out one of those two ways, and I think it should. I don't think you are going to get fair market value for Pete Alonso if you try to trade him, not with 1 year left. Keith saying Nimmo loves New York. DeGrom had one foot out the door the whole time, and that's fair. I actually think Pete likes being here. Now, maybe somebody will dispute that. Maybe he doesn't love it as much as Nimmo or as much as he claims to love it. But I think Pete loves it more than DeGrom does if you take those as opposite sides of the spectrum. Yeah. So, and then we have Jeff Cohen saying Alonso won't get Judge money. No, Judge got 9 years, $360 million. Alonso's going to get
not even close.
Half of that, like half.
Yeah.
Probably more than half, but like in the 180 to 2 something is what you're looking at. But he will be the highest paid first baseman in baseball. Power hitters are hard to find. And that's exactly the final point I want to make on this. I know that I've talked about it over and over and over again. The market has been set consistently. Freeman, Goldschmidt, Olsen. All three of those guys, two of them inarguably, are all around better players than Pete Alonso is, Goldschmidt and Freeman. Olsen, I think to this point, has been a comparable player to Pete Alonso. This year, he's having a career year, and Alonso is having a quote-unquote down year by his standards, except for power and RBIs. So those players are the ones that have set the market. If you gave Pete Alonso an offer of $200 million, he would immediately be the highest paid first baseman in baseball in terms of the total length and value of the contract. Better than all three of those. And I think that's a deal he has to consider. I don't think, Ibby, on the open market, he is getting so much more than that it is grotesque. No. Because he's not so much better than any of those guys. He's not, period, point blank.
Yeah, I've been saying I don't think first base is getting the money that it used to. I think the game is changing. And I mean, because we keep on saying it, like when you really think about it.
Sorry, keep jumping in saying Alonso loves New York.
Yeah. So the thing that you got to think about is, like, we're throwing the number out there as 200. And I really believe that if he was the highest paid first baseman in that sense, from whether he wants the AAV or the total based off of the new contracts, whatever it may be that he's looking for, if they offered him 200 and he said no, I think he's insane. If they offered him, but again, because that article also says that an offer is made or, talks were had and there's distance between the two, well, that tells me something right away. That tells me that the Mets are not offering $200 million. That tells me that the Mets are probably offering less than probably what Olson got as an offer. My guess is they're probably saying to him, they probably offered him maybe a 5-year deal. That's like 160, something like that, or whatever it may be. So however the math would be, but less than what those other guys got. And he's probably saying, no, I want more. And, I forgot who it was, but I didn't like how somebody automatically jumped to the Carlos Correa offer that obviously didn't happen and fell through, and then saying, oh, Pete's going to ask for that now. It's like, no, that's not how it works. It's a different position. It's not the same. It's not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges in that sense.
Also, let's be clear. Carlos Correa also potentially, and his ship has sailed. It's ancient history, but he offered you something that no one else on the free agent market could offer you. He offered you one great play at third base and the ability to slide over and give you great play at shortstop.
Yeah.
If something was to happen to Lindor.
Right. Flexibility there and the whole
Pete
thing.
Pete is a one-trick pony. I love Pete, but Pete is a first baseman and a DH.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. So it's always going to come down to, how this goes, and to give my point on it. I'm probably a little bit different than you, John, in this one, where if they don't get the extension, like if they have talks this offseason and they say, Pete, we're thinking whatever the number is, and he says, nope, and the agent goes, nope. If this is where you're going to have your hard line, and this is going to be your line in the sand, then we're going to free agency. And if that is what is said, I do believe that they will trade him, because as much as it's like get something for a given player, and I'm with you, I still question what the hell the return would be with 1 year. But sometimes teams get desperate, and you can get more on a 1 year as opposed to a half year at the deadline. But I do think that if I'll put it this way, I think that they would risk it from a stance of, I'm going to get a top flight prospect, at least one, back for this player, and I'll risk him still testing the open market, because if he turned down my contract that I offered, I don't think that anyone is going to go beyond, because of the viewpoint of what Pete is. He's a power hitter, yes. Decent first baseman, could go downhill in that sense as he gets older. Probably not going to get the years he thinks he's going to get from somebody else, especially or the total money. So they might say, we'll deal you, and then look, we're going to be there in free agency again, and we're going to throw the same number at you again, and we're going to try to get you back because we don't think that you're going to get more. I could see something like that playing out. I understand where you might go with an argument here, saying, look, once you go into someone else's building, you might love it there, and they might take care of you. You might sign the contract, and that's very well true. Same thing we always talk about when it comes to, you can't think ahead. You can't think years ahead and assume that someone's going to be a free agent. 1,000 things can happen, and very true. But if it comes down to it, and they say to him, look, this is our offer, and he says no, I really think that they will work the phones and try to extrapolate something of strong value in their eyes, at least, to get something back for him, and then run the chance of potentially re-signing him in that offseason, because they're going to think that he's not going to sign an extension with that team.
I disagree.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's fine.
First of all, my feeling is I wouldn't do it. Like if I were running the Mets, I wouldn't operate that way. But the reason why I disagree is David Stearns as the X factor. So if you're David Stearns,
assuming, yeah.
If you're David Stearns and you're going to come here and you're going to run the Mets, the first move you're going to do is trade the fan favorite, best homegrown hitter the Mets ever. He's not going to do that.
Yeah, it's a very hard spot to do that.
He is not going to be able to sell that, period.
It's true. I mean,
if he trades Pete, he could then turn around and trade for, I'm just going to make up a name here that I think would move the needle, right? He trades Pete, and then he goes out and he acquires Mike Trout. It won't be a 1-for-1. Now, Mike Trout's still, at this point in his career, a better player than Pete Alonso, right? Like, obviously he's older, so the potential for him to be a great player moving forward is already on the downturn, but he's a center fielder, and Mike Trout is inarguably great. People are going to go, okay, so you just traded Pete for Trout, basically. Like, that's not the trade, but, like, you swapped one guy out, you swapped another guy in, so now who protects Trout? Like, that's going to be the argument, and that's going to be a fair argument. How did the Mets get better? Well, the Mets got a center fielder, and they're going to slide Nimmo over to left field. Cool. Okay, perfect. So you're going to go in the lineup, you're going to go Nimmo, Lindor, Trout. Now who? You can't do it. You can't make that trade. There's no trade, even if you acquire somebody who is excellent, because there are no free agents on the market that make sense. Mm-hmm. Even if you went out, maybe. And this is a sterling scenario. Also, by the way, you have to take on a ton of Trout's money, which then doesn't even make any fucking sense, because then just pay Pete because he's younger.
Right. Agreed.
But you go out now, you trade Pete Alonso. You then give up player assets to acquire one of the best players in baseball, although he's probably on the downturn in Mike Trout. You then, to replace Alonso, pay money to go get a guy who's going to make a bunch coming off of a good year in Cody Bellinger, and you put him at first base. The rhetoric's going to be just fucking pay Alonso.
Would the rhetoric be the same? And again, this is pie in the sky scenario. Things not going well in this spot. Worried about returns. Again, I don't even know what the offer would be, but I'm gonna just pull one out of the sky right now. If I said Pete Alonso with Ronny Mauricio and Mike Vassell, I'm just picking names. I'm not really looking, but I just gave you 3 names right there, and you shipped them to San Diego for Juan Soto. Does that change? Does that change the thought process? Again, that is just me picking names out of the sky.
It doesn't, because here's the thing.
Okay.
Juan Soto's contract, you're going to have to pay Juan Soto $400 million.
Correct.
Probably.
But are they choosing? Would they choose to spend that type of money, as opposed to giving Pete the money that he's asking for?
I wouldn't. Juan Soto is better than Pete. I understand that. Juan Soto is better than Pete. He's got it all. Juan Soto is basically this generation's version of Ted Williams. He has an elite eye, he has elite power, and he hits for an elite average. He is unbelievable. He is a huge negative in the field, and I don't think some of his ability is going to age well. When you talk about Pete not aging well, Juan Soto's going to be a DH before long, or he's going to have to move to first base. So now you're paying $400 million for a first baseman when you weren't willing to pay $200 million for a first baseman. So I think Juan Soto's a great fit on the Mets, but I think Juan Soto's a better fit on the Mets with Pete Alonso, because again, they ship him out. Now who else is there? Also, not bad. I'm not saying he's been bad, but since Juan Soto has left the Nationals and he's been in prime time, he has not been the same player. He's not been as good.
It's true.
On a team that has expectations to win every year, where he was acquired, and he's got tons of talent around him. Right. Now, that whole team is flawed. There's something wrong with the Padres.
Yeah,
clearly.
There's something wrong with that. Yeah.
Because that team, a team that has Manny Machado, Soto, Xander Bogaerts, Cronenworth, and Tatis Jr., and what's the second baseman's name? Kim? They've got all these ball players, and they're horrendous. So there's something wrong with that team. But you're going to try to sell me on getting Pete out of here, bringing in Soto with less help than he has in the Padres, and that's somehow going to make him better? See, that's the thing, Ibby. It's not. Yeah. I know I said before that anybody can be traded, and anybody can be traded. You know, and Yamid saying the Mets traded Seaver. Pete can be traded. If the Mets play good baseball, fans will be there. Yeah, guys, I'm not this person that's saying I'm going to give up being a Mets fan if they trade Pete Alonso. Right. No, I'm going to be a Mets fan no matter what happens. I have these frame things on my wall, and I've got things all over my apartment that you can't see. I ain't going anywhere. I'm not leaving. I'm not boycotting, but I'm not going to be happy because they're not going to be as good. And you can't use Tom Seaver being traded as the reason. Tom Seaver should have never been fucking traded. It's one of the worst trades in the history of the sport. So you can't use that as like anybody can be traded. The Mets traded Tom Seaver, and what happened? They got worse.
Yeah.
They got worse, not better. Took them a long time to recover from that. Now, nobody's going to confuse Pete with Tom Seaver. Pete is not Tom Seaver, okay? He's not that in terms of Tom Seaver's an all-time great, but you can't use that as the reason. He does follow up by saying Soto's only had 1 year where he hit 30 home runs, so let's hold back that he's an elite power guy. He's more like Votto, too many walks. Fair, okay? But I'm just saying that he has rare, unique talent, Soto, that is greater than what Pete Alonso offers. But to me, if you trade Alonso, no matter who you bring in, they're getting worse. They're getting worse objectively.
Especially like we talked about with Casey, like it's odds are, and I just brought that up as a
that's not going to be the deal that happens.
Right. They just brought that up as
an extension. They signed Machado to an extension. They just signed Bogart, so they can't move Cronenworth. They don't have room for Pete Alonso.
They don't have room, but it's just a scenario of what if. But no matter what, if they deal him, it's probably going to be an ugly deal. Because you're going to get back guys that you probably either don't know, or to John's point, you're putting a top flight player in a very hard situation because there's less around him, whether from where he's coming from or just a lesser lineup in general, and asking him to do more. But yeah, I really wonder if they would. I mean, I guess I can't say I would really be shocked because they played it out with Nimmo and they didn't get anything and he became a free agent and they ended up bringing him back. I guess it really comes down to their confidence when it comes to, how steadfast he is when it comes to this money. Mm-hmm. So if they're saying, look, Pete, we're going to give you $180 million. That's it. 6 years, 180. That's our offer. And he says, well, nope, I'm at 250. So that's a big gap. That is Yankees and Cano, big gap in Seattle coming in. Now, do I think that can happen again, where somebody just blows the Mets offer out of the water because they think that he is worth that contract and the Mets don't? Even with Steve Cohen, look, like I said, it happened with DeGrom already. Like, do I think he can leave if someone blows him away in that sense? Is it possible? Sure. Do I think it's going to happen? I really don't. I really think that Pete would get humbled. As crazy as it sounds to say that, I think he would get humbled on the open market. I really do.
I agree with you. Pete Alonso, if you ask me gun to my head right now, there is not a snowball, and I love him. I just gave you the case.
We all did.
You can't trade him. You love him.
We all did.
We disagree on some of the minutia, but we both love him.
Yeah.
Pete Alonso, if you put a gun to my head, he's not getting 250.
He's not.
Period.
No.
Now, could I see a scenario where maybe in the open market in a bidding war, maybe he gets 220? I could see that potentially if a market goes crazy. He's not getting 250. Freddie Freeman has an AAV of $27 million a year. He got 6 for 162. Now, he signed that at 31 years old, free agent, open market, but of course his free agency did not go swimmingly. But that's a great deal, $27 million annually. Paul Goldschmidt, older than Freeman, signed his deal when he was 32 years old. He got 5 for 130. Now that's an extension. That's staying with the team he got traded to. That's $26 million a year. Both of these guys have won MVPs. They're both 7-time All-Stars, multiple-time Silver Sluggers. Goldschmidt is a multiple-time Gold Glover. Freeman has 1 Gold Glove. Freeman has the World Series. Goldschmidt's never won a World Series. You got Matt Olson. Matt Olson, 2-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glover. He signs 8/168. That is a $21 million AAV. Now, that is also signing an extension. That is signing an extension with the Braves. The Braves, with their demon magic, get guys to sign for $14. He's having a career year. But if you look at their career stats, Alonso and Olson are eerily similar. Now, Olson is the better all-around player because he's a much better defender than Alonso. He's also a left-handed bat. But you look at this bottom stat here, Alonso led the major leagues in home runs once and RBI once. Goldschmidt led the NL in both in 2013. And right now, Olson is on pace or is leading the NL in home runs and the MLB in RBI. But we don't know if that's going to stand up, right? We don't know if either one of those things are going to hold up. The other three guys, as great as they are, have never done that. Pete Alonso's already led baseball in home runs in his rookie season, and he led the Major League Baseball last year when the Mets were great in RBI. So he deserves to get paid. That's why I keep saying give him $200 million. $200 million over 8 years is $25 million a year. That puts him just under Freeman, just under Goldschmidt and AAV, just above Olson. So if he wants to say he's better than Olson, he can say he's better than Olson, and it puts him in total contract value higher than all three of them. That's a fair deal. $200 million is fair for Pete Alonso. It's probably high, but it's fair. Yeah. So I just think if he thinks he's getting $250 million, I agree with you. He is in for a rude awakening in free agency, a very rude awakening. He ain't getting it.
Yeah, and we could look, we could be off here too, and we could be thinking where he might be saying he wants a contract for. Look, he could be asking for $180 for all we know, and the Mets are saying, we're going to give you $150. That's our hard stance. I mean, that we could be talking about, like, we don't know what the number is. We don't know where it is, but it could be a difference there. Where he says, I want 180. Mets are saying we're going to give you 5 years for $150. Like, I don't know. It could be something like, I have no idea. But
I will say if the Mets are doing that, the Mets are lowballing him.
I would agree with that. I think
of the three players, I think you have to look at Olson, similar ages, both potentially signing extensions. You look at the career line, 253, 349, 517 with a 866 OPS for Olson, 219 home runs. You look at Alonso, 253, 344, 531 slash line, 185 home runs, obviously playing a little bit less because he started his career just a bit later, 875 OPS on the career. Those are eerily similar numbers. So to me, if I'm Alonso, I'm saying he got 8,168. You can't be offering me 150. You got to offer me, 8,175, 8,180, 8,190. That's why I keep saying 200, because I think 200. I think if you offer him 200, he signs it right now.
Which is why I think that we keep on saying that number, and that's why I think it's below that. And with what you just said, it could easily be him saying, I want 180. And the Mets might be saying, we're offering 150. That's why I'm starting to come down a little bit, because if it was 200, I really, especially where the game is gone, like if you're saying no to that, to test the open market, it's like, dude, I think you're really like missing the mark here. And I would be like yelling at the agent too. It's like, and maybe that's where we're off, where it's like, maybe the argument is more so he's asking for $180 and the Mets are coming in lower than what even an Olson got. And he might be fighting to say the same argument you made. Look at these numbers. Look at these home runs. I want to be here. I want to break these records. I want to be a part of the solution. I'm not part of the problem. I want to win here. A 180. That's the number. Let's go. And if they're saying nope, 150, then I could say, yeah, you're lowballing in that sense, because I think he could be worth a contract in that 180 range with some years to it.
Yeah, listen, look, and I will be the first person. I say this right now at 4:01 p.m. West Coast time, 7:01 p.m. East Coast time on Wednesday, August 30th, 2023. If the Mets trade Alonso, or Alonso walks at a year from now, whatever the case may be, whenever we find out, and there's a leak that the Mets offered him 150, 160, I will take the Mets ownership to task for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Because I think that is criminally low.
Yeah.
I think his number starts at 180, because I think the 168 that Olson got is a little bit of a sweetheart deal, because that's what the Braves do, right? And I think when they gave Olsen the extension of 168, Olsen was not yet objectively a better player than Alonso. He was a better all-around player, but he wasn't necessarily a better player, period, stop, than what Alonso is. So I think they're paying him for future production, which he's clearly gave them. He's having a great season, a career year for him. And they're paying him based on that projection. And they're also paying him the Atlanta Braves way, which is a little bit less because they pay him early. The Mets have to pay a penalty for not paying Alonso early. So I think the number starts at 180. But I think 180 to 200 million in that ballpark is fair. If Cohen needs to pay 215 to get it done and he doesn't care and he wants to, I'm not going to be mad if they pay him more and they keep him. It doesn't matter. He's got so much money. To me, that's not the point. The point is what the fair value is for him. And this is a good comment from Yamid. It's from earlier, and I think it's twofold. He said Pujols is one of the best players in the game. He topped out at 220 for 10. Now, obviously, that's a long time ago. The market has shifted.
Inflation, things change, but I understand that.
But the crux of the argument is, as a primary first baseman and the undisputed best player in the sport, who has now hit 700 home runs at the end of his career with, and had years where he hit 45 home runs, knocked in 130 and hit 340. He's getting $20 million a year. Now, I know the market has changed, but that's best player in baseball money who just happens to be a first baseman. No one is confusing Pete Alonso for the best player in baseball. He is not going to touch best player in baseball money. Like Jeff Cohen said earlier, Aaron Judge got 9,360. Well, Aaron Judge sometimes plays center field, guys. Aaron Judge hits 50 home runs and plays center field for the Yankees. Yeah. It's not the same. Now, is Aaron Judge going to play center field at the end of those 9 years? No, of course not. No. He's probably going to DH or play more right field or maybe play some first base. Who knows? But you're paying Judge the same way that the Yankees or the Mets would have to pay Alonso because the Yankees didn't extend him. Yeah. And the factor there is that Judge was hurt a lot, so they didn't want to extend him. And I understand that. So Stevie Mack saying, I'm 86% sure the Braves held Olsen's family at gunpoint when they were negotiating his deals. Carson says, it might be that Alonso knows how important he is to this team compared to Freeman to LA, Olsen to ATL, and that's true and why I would buy into, given his impact, you have to overpay no matter what. And that's why I'm saying I would overpay a bit, but I also think that Pete, I'm not speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I'm with you, Ibby. I think he gets humbled in free agency. Overpay does not mean $250 million. No one is paying that much money for him in this market, period.
No, they're not. I mean, the only thing, I have nothing else to really add to the Alonso discourse. I'm just more curious that if this Disha article kind of puts a lot of this to rest, I'm very curious on what we're going to talk about next week or going forward. But either way, we'll have some fun and we'll have a good time regardless.
We will. There is some stuff we didn't get to. Cookie Carrasco going on waivers. It's about time. Obviously, it's when you can do that, but you know what I mean. The Angels probably had the worst. This is my final thought. The Angels had the worst trade deadline of the entirety of the existence before, not even in baseball history. I think in the history of humanity, where anybody traded anything for anything, like
should have sold.
Noodles for sold. Like if you're trading like noodles for silk. Still, this is the worst trade deadline that anybody's ever had. This is unbelievably bad. They buy at the deadline, and then they put up basically all of the players they bought on waivers because it didn't work. It's just unbelievably
classic Angels.
Oh, God.
Contract so that team.
Also, the Mets should put a claim in on Lucas Giolito.
Yeah, why not?
They should.
They won't, but they should.
But they should, because the Mets need a starting pitcher, and I've targeted him as a guy who could be a 4 or 5 for them next year. No qualifying offer.
Did you know he's given up like 30 home runs this year?
I know. I listen, he hasn't been good. I just think when you need as many people in the rotation
I agree.
as they need, I don't think he's going to get a ton of money. And I think if you get him in the building now, you could have a couple starts out of him, see how it goes. And then even if he pitches well, you might as an organization go this guy sucks. He's pitching well, but it's purely good luck. No, we're not re-signing him. And then you're good. And then you don't have to worry about it. I would put a claim in on him. That's just me.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I would put a claim in on Hunter Renfroe. I'd rather see him in the outfield than some of the guys we have running out there. And plus the outfield depth on this team, though it's getting better, and we'll see some of the young guys next year. Still potential power bat too. Like that's the type of guy I would put a claim in on. But yeah, other than that, Angels are a joke. Always have been, always will be. As long as Artie Moreno is there, should have sold at the deadline, should have traded Ohtani, didn't do it. Cowards. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. I'm very brutally honest when it comes to the Angels because I think they are a goddamn joke.
They are a goddamn joke. As somebody who lives about 40 miles from their stadium, they are a goddamn joke. Anyway, the Mets game has started. We tried to wrap up before. We did not. Thank you guys for staying with us. Our numbers didn't drop off. I thought we were going to have a...
How many do we have today? I can't see the number.
Our high water mark was, I think, just over 20. We're at 19 right now.
Ah, beautiful. I'll take that.
A lot of people doing their thing, and I thought people were going to leave in spades or in droves, I should say, and they didn't. So that's great. Thank you for being
We're better than Arauz. We're better than
we are better than Arauz. That's fair. Keith Blacknick saying Angels should have sold the team itself, not just the players. I agree. Carson saying Moreno ego crash strikes again. I agree with that. Keith Blacknick saying quick QBC news. We are waiting for the ink to dry, but once we get our first guest for QBC 23, announcing it around Labor Day, which is coming up very, very quickly. Labor Day, of course, this weekend. Everybody have a safe and healthy Labor Day, which is the official, unofficial end to the summer out there. Not here in the land of perpetual summer where everything is beautiful all the time. But, it is what it is. Anyway, I'm John. That's Ibby. This is Till Mets Do Us Part. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and we will see you next time. Peace.